40 years after its theatrical debut, Star Trek The Motion Picture remains a divisive installment of the long-running franchise. Harlan Ellison offered his assessment in 1980. The saddening reality is simply that it is a dull film, an often boring film, a stud-defyingly predictable film, a tragically average film. Other reviewers have dismissed the movie with less eloquent descriptions than Ellison, calling it the slow motion picture, the motionless picture, the motion sickness, and Where No Man Has Gone Before, a reference to the original Star Trek episode The Changeman, the plot of which bears some resemblance to the film. However, despite lukewarm reviews and a mixed response from fans, the movie was a box office smash. According to an analysis in Daily Variety, of the 1.1 billion movie tickets purchased at the US box office in 1979, nearly 1 in 4 was for Star Trek The Motion Picture. In the years and decades since its initial release, there's also been a reassessment of the film's merits in some circles. Mark A. Altman, author of many of the books of the franchise, recently called it the most cinematic of the Star Trek movies. Brian Fuller, co-creator of Star Trek Discovery, has proclaimed it a flawed masterpiece. A search for Star Trek The Motion Picture appreciation will bring up multiple groups and forums online dedicated to the movie, each with thousands of members. And yet, despite the decades of reviews, criticism and reassessment, including a recut director's edition of the film that was released on DVD in 2001, there's still many things most people don't know about the making of the first Star Trek movie. With that in mind, I'm the returning V'ger Sean Ferrick, and this is 20 things you didn't know about Star Trek The Motion Picture. 20. A Star Trek theatrical release was considered as early as 1965. Following Star Trek's cancellation in 1969, rumours and hopes of a motion picture or television revival immediately began swirling. But talk of a theatrical Star Trek release can be traced back much earlier than the fan phenomenon it became in the 1970s. After NBC rejected the first Star Trek pilot, The Menagerie, in 1965, Gene Roddenberry wrote to its star, Jeffrey Hunter, to propose bringing him back for a couple of days to expand the episode to theatrical length. An episode of Roddenberry's previous television series, The Lieutenant, had been released in this manner internationally as To Kill a Man in 1964. Indeed, American television episodes were re-edited, sometimes with new footage, into movies for shows including Mission Impossible, Custer, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Disneyland, specifically Davy Crockett, Ramar of the Jungle, and The Untouchables. These compilation films were mostly released overseas. Every actor in Star Trek had a theatrical rate built into their contract in case this happened. Typically SAG minimum, although actors like William Shatner negotiated for more. When NBC ordered a second pilot and Hunter decided not to continue with Star Trek, this idea appears to have been abandoned. But it was reconsidered later on. On June 20th, 1967, Roddenberry wrote to Robert Colson, an American science fiction writer and editor of the fanzine Yandro, about renewed possibilities following the sale of Desilu to Golden Western, almost apparent. In the same letter, Roddenberry offered budgetary aspirations that would be achieved more than 40 times over when Star Trek The Motion Picture was finally realised 12 years later. Baseless rumours circulated during the world of the television series too. On May 4th, 1967, Science Fiction Times editor James Ash sent a letter to Roddenberry asking about a rumoured Star Trek movie. Apparently, author James Blish had mentioned the possibility at a recent convention, and Ash wanted to know if the scoop was true. It certainly wouldn't be the last time a fan queried Roddenberry for news about Star Trek. 19. Elements of a Roddenberry script called Star Trek II, aka The God Thing, ended up in the movie. Starting in the mid-70s, there were several attempts to revive Star Trek, some for the silver screen and some for the smaller one, and bits and pieces of those attempts ended up in the final film. In 1975, Gene Roddenberry wrote a feature script titled simply Star Trek II, but which fandom calls The God Thing. This story is to first introduce a concept which would end up in the Star Trek The Motion Picture, a huge alien object threatening Earth that turns out, essentially, to be a great computer. Several other elements introduced here would appear in virtually every other proposal before ending up in the finished movie. Enterprise being rebuilt as now the most powerful ship in Starfleet, the old crew being pulled together to confront the object, and Spock studying with Masters and Vulcan in some sort of remote monastery. Roddenberry later tried to adapt this material into a Star Trek novel for Bantam Books in 1976 or 77, at one point enlisting the help of Star Trek actor Walter Koenig to work on the manuscript, but the novel was never completed. Star Trek novelist Michael Jeffrey Friedman was brought on board by Pocket Books to try adapting the novel again in the early 1990s, but despite cover artwork for the novel being completed by artist Steve Birdsong, the project did not get very far and was ultimately cancelled. 18. Elements of 3 other story outlines called Star Trek II made it into the movie too. Months after Star Trek II / The God Thing, A young writer Roddenberry worked with named John Powell took a stab at Star Trek II, writing a completely new treatment under the same title. Not much from this one makes it into the final film, but it does contain the first mention of the strange cloud thing, albeit here it has a different properties than the V'ger cloud. In January of 1976, Powell and Roddenberry finished a collaboration on yet another version of Star Trek II. This story outline contains the first mention of a black hole, which would appear in every single proposal from then on and end up as a reference to Star Trek the motion picture. Powell and Roddenberry took one more stab at the idea a few months later. Here, Spock tries to decipher thought emanations from an immensely powerful alien entity, but the entity's thought is too complex even for him. Also introduced is the idea of humanity eventually evolving into a higher, non-corporeal life form. 17. Pieces of an infamous Star Trek story outline, aka Planet of the Titans, are in the movie too. October of 1976 brought a new set of writers to the table, Alan Scott and Chris Bryant, who turned into a story outline that was simply titled Star Trek. In fandom, this story is better known as Planet of the Titans. This one introduces several new elements that ended up in the eventual movie. The transporter accident, which in this instance mangles Spock's dad Sarek but doesn't kill him, Spock failing to eliminate his human half, and, most significantly, the notion of a mechanized planet of incredible technology. The civilization of Titans was so advanced that the distinction between animal, vegetable, and machine has become blurred. Although this concept went to script, to date this screenplay has never been seen publicly, so it's impossible to know what other elements it might have introduced. When Paramount rejected this version too, the director attached to it, Philip Kaufman, later to direct Leonard Nimoy in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, took a stab at writing a new story outline, but the studio pulled the plug on the entire movie in favour of making Star Trek back into a TV show for a prospective Paramount TV service. 16. Before and after it was a movie, the Star Trek revival was planned as a TV series called Star Trek II. When Philip Kaufman's Star Trek movie was put on ice, the studio shifted to developing a new TV series. If you're not confused yet, the TV series was yet another project to be titled Star Trek II. In fandom, the abandoned program is popularly known as Star Trek Phase 2, although the name was only briefly used for the project. This series proposal introduced the characters of Ilia and Decker into the mix. Persis Khambatta had a screen test on October 27, 1977 and signed a 6-year contract to play Ilia on television before the plug was pulled. An actor was not selected for the Decker role. Stephen Collins only joined the project after it transformed back into a feature film. Sets and models were in various stages of completion at that point. Some would be modified and used in the movie, while others would be completely rebuilt and redesigned. Of the various stories proposed for a TV movie to relaunch Star Trek, In Thy Image was chosen. Alan Dean Foster, a science fiction writer who had adapted the animated Star Trek into a series of books for Ballantine, wrote the story outline based on a premise called Robots Return by Gene Roddenberry. In Thy Image brought a variation of the object from 1975's God Thing script, now called V'ger. 15. The theft of some Enterprise blueprints led to an FBI sting operation. In 1977, when the project was still proceeding as a television series to be called Star Trek II, a man named John Thomas Askew paid a visit to the sets, which were still under construction, and swiped a set of blueprints he found laying on a workbench. Askew would have got away with it if he had just held on to the documents, but in late 1977 he decided to offer the blueprints to a fan, Mark Siegel, for $200. Siegel felt the offer was a bit fishy, possibly because Askew only had